Hey everybody, it's Pastor Siri. I'm a Lutheran pastor and a spiritual seeker, and I am going to be talking about lesson 1 from the Curriculum of Love. So the Curriculum of Love I created for my church, and it's also being used by lots of other churches and individuals, may not even be Christian individuals, and we are going through this basic concept of the heart of faith is loving and connecting with God and loving your neighbor as you love yourself. And so we're looking at all 3 of those relationships, and we're starting with loving God. Now, we're going to get into a lot of who's God? What are we talking about? Everything. So stick with me. It's going to be great. So yeah, immediately you might be like, okay, what are you talking about? I had a great friend email me and say, what do you mean when you say God? How do you love God? What are you talking about when you say God? And I think that is a really, really good question. I'm not going to tell you, because I think that's part of the fundamental part of the whole thing that I'm trying to get at, is that we're redefining for ourselves. We're finding our own spiritual authority and redefining the relationships that we have between ourselves, between the people around us, and between whatever it is that we call God. We get to define and redefine that. And it does need defining and redefining, because most of what we have been taught and most of what we carry with us as ideas of how to relate to ourselves and to whatever's out there is not really always great and not filtered through a higher loving level of consciousness. Most of our experiences with God have been as a child when we grew up and we went to church and maybe we went to Sunday school and we got these really childlike basic concepts of God. And as we got older, maybe we didn't always get a chance to sort of sift through that and let those images evolve with us. So one of the things that I had us do is in this lesson plan was to actually think about what's the image you grew up with of God and how has that changed, and to even write a job description for God. Like if you could tell God how you wanted God to work for you, what would you do? But the other thing is that the spiritual practice for the whole week, which I did too, is to write a letter to God. And this to me was a way of you starting to form a bridge of going into that vulnerability of actually speaking to, sharing your feelings, your thoughts, your secrets, all of that to God, and to see what happens, see what unfolds over the course of the week. And I will tell you that what unfolded for me, while the exercise wasn't necessarily novel for me, was that I noticed that I started out with the recommendation, Dear God, and then I wrote my feelings and my thoughts. But over the course of the week, I didn't write Dear God anymore. I started to change who I was referring to. And I know some people have written to love. Some people might write to Jesus or the Holy Spirit. Some people might write. Who you write to, I think, is so important and says a lot about who and how you want to relate to. Because sometimes God can be so ethereal and out there and covered up with the dogma and the crap. We have a lot of dismantling to do in terms of this God of wrath that is out there in the culture, this male, masculine, patriarchal God who's jealous and abusive and just judging us all the time, which is pretty awful. Like, why would you want to get close to that God? So what is the God that we feel comfortable getting close to? What is that aspect of God, that way that we can write to God? It could be feminine, it could be more romantic, it could be, there's so many different ways we could go. For me personally, I was writing to my guides. Over 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, I was introduced to the concept of spirit guides, which is not necessarily a Lutheran Christian perspective, by the way. But I thought it was actually quite lovely to think that we each have a team of spirit guides that are sort of with us, encouraging us, and kind of like guardian angels and ancestors. They're with us to encourage us and to guide us along our life. And that to me felt really approachable and still feels really approachable. And I think that's part of the first thing that dawned for me in this lesson, going through it myself, was really, really taking the authority to speak to God in a way that you are comfortable with. Of course you can do that. You can call God whatever. You can have an image of God for whatever. Do you honestly think God cares? Or you can go to a version or an aspect of some holy person that you like, that feels approachable, a saint or a historical figure. If that makes you feel more comfortable, that's what you're going to work with. Because God is not this jealous, ego-driven person. God is beyond all of that. And I thought of this story today. So if you're a parent and one of your kids is starting to come home and you can tell something's wrong, they're coming home, they don't look how they normally do, they go right to their room, they slam the door, you maybe even hear them crying. You try to talk to them, but they won't talk to you. You know something's wrong. You're starting to get worried. You're starting to get really, really worried. And this is happening day after day after day. And this is not your kid. Maybe they're not even eating very much at the table anymore. You know something is wrong. But for some reason, they're not talking to you. And then one night, your oldest child comes to you and says, hey, I had a really good talk with so-and-so. And they told me all the crap that is going on in their life. And they gave me permission to tell you, and this is how you can support them. But yeah, you'll just be glad that they talk to someone, right? Like, if you get to the point where you're just like, well, how dare they not talk to me? And you go and you trounce over to your kid's room and start yelling at them for like, how dare you not trust me and talk to me? Why did you have to talk to your sibling? Well, you just ruined all the trust there. You know, that is not an evolved, loving response. An evolved, loving response is going to care about the kid more than about your own ego. Why would God not be 10 million times more mature than that? So we don't have to get God right. We don't have to have this perfect image because our brains probably can't handle God anyway. What we need to do, however, is feel the freedom to question a God that is terrifying for us, that we don't want anything to do with, and have the freedom to dismantle that and start to relate to Spirit, God, in a way that makes sense to us. This is what I actually love about Hinduism, is that they talk about how the one creator God, Brahman, is sort of an unknowable, transient God. And so all the gods and goddesses in the pantheons are aspects of the one God. They wouldn't say they're polytheistic. They would actually say they believe in one God. It's just that all of those different gods and goddesses are an aspect, from the sweetest, most gentle, all the way to the most fierce, protective mama bear version of God, because all of those fit. And you and where you are in your life are going to resonate with that vibration and that personality of one particular God. And when you then put your adoration and worship on that God or goddess can guide you along on the path. Why wouldn't God be the same way? I know that might freak some people out because you're like, no, there's a biblical God and we have to get God right. Here's the deal with that. The God that Jesus revealed sometimes felt like it was in contrast to the God of the Old Testament. That's all in the Bible. And even within different parables, there's all sorts of interesting things and ways that Jesus talks about God overwhelmingly loving, unconditional, breaking our boundaries. But clearly, even Jesus had to help people dismantle their concept of God in that time. So why would we not have to do the same? It's part of growing up. It's part of the life that we lead, is we go from childish beliefs to adult beliefs. And so many people never stop to question their concept of God. They never stop to question that they have the right to think about God in a way and relate to God in a way that works for them. So we're going to continue on this journey. We still have 3 more weeks where we talk about loving God. But that was the insight that I wanted to share with you, is when we talk about loving God, the first thing we do is get rid of the notions of God that make you uncomfortable. Tell them to go away. You don't need them. That's not for you. And start to imagine and form a relationship with the God you can relate to, and just see what happens. Okay. I'm kind of curious what your thoughts and your comments are. And if you have any more questions for me, But also there's a link in the description box to the curriculum if you want to join along. You can download it, and it is 15 weeks. It's going to guide you through a lot of spiritual exercises and ways to think that is going to get stuff moving inside. We will see you later. Bye-bye.